All right, so today I want to talk about testing GitHub Actions workflows. I want to talk about making a change and then how to test that easily. So of course, I can always modify a workflow. Here's a YAML file. I can always modify this and then push the changes out to GitHub. For example, I could list out the runtimes, add that to the steps. Over at the command line, check that in, push it out, hop out to GitHub, and just wait here. And there you go. I kicked off a build. Can drill into that run. Watch that as it's running. And then drill into the logs and take a look at the step that I added. All right, there you go. This is the step that I added right here. And there's the output. And I can tell now that this works. And while this works, it's not exactly the easiest of things to go through every time you make a change to a workflow. So instead, it'd be nice to have something that I could run locally, such that when I make a change here, for example, to list out the SDKs, I can save that. And I don't need to push anything out to GitHub. I don't need to make a commit. Instead, over at the command line, I can use a tool called act, and I can point at the workflow, which was .NET and build. So I can run this right here on my machine. I get all the output as if this had run out on GitHub, except I never had to push anything out. So I'll wait for this to complete here. It's even downloading a version of .NET because I have a step in there to set up .NET v9. And there you go, it's done. And if I look at the output here, there's a lot here, I'll admit that. You can see this is the .NET list SDKs that I added. I can see the output here. So I now know that this works. And of course, I could then go to the next step of my pipeline, add a step here to .NET and build. So go ahead and test building the application. Back over at the command line. If I want to save some time, I could add a reuse argument. This will create a reusable environment. It'll save the time of not having to install .NET every time. Now when I do that, it'll take just as much time as before because it has to set up .NET once again. All right, that's done now. Here's my .NET build. And you can see the output, including building the API DLL. So I find this to be a convenient way to make changes to a workflow and not need to push it out every time. And it's a pretty iterative thing. For example, I can come add yet another step here. Maybe I want to list out the files, and I want to look in the bin directory in debug, and then in net60. So I come out here, run that again with the reuse flag. This should be even faster this time. And it'll be faster because it already has .NET installed. That's what the reuse flag does. And there you go, it's done. And you can see the output here of listing out the files. So definitely beneficial if you're working with GitHub Actions, especially if you're new to GitHub Actions. This is a great way to iteratively learn how to set up a workflow and not have to push everything out to GitHub and rely on its runners. And then if I hop out to the website for this project, nektos/act out on GitHub, or you can click to the site for this project. And you have choices like Homebrew for a Mac or WinGit for Windows. And then the workflow I like is once I get it tested locally, come over to the command line. You can see I've still got the changes. Go ahead and check those in, push it out. Now come out to GitHub, sit out here and wait for the workflow to trigger. There you go. And now I can confirm that this actually works out on a GitHub runner as well. And of course, there are going to be nuances that are different between a GitHub runner, even a self-hosted runner, and using the act tool. You'll figure that out as you use it. And even with those discrepancies, it's still an incredibly valuable tool.